want to talk to you about the connection between making art and making change. So the first idea, which is a pretty basic idea, is that all change begins with a vision. And that's true whether you're talking about personal, intimate scale change, like daydreaming about a better life for you and your family. Or that's true for large-scale, pattern-breaking change like the civil rights movement. Any scale change begins with a vision. Someone had to imagine something new, better, different. And the fact that they had to imagine something new and better and different implies that there was something wrong with the current reality. And so what that underlies is visionary thinking is about a combination between critique, critical thinking, and creativity. So you have to be able to move past the critique, past the analysis about what's wrong, and actually be able to imagine what's on the other side of that critique. What's the change that you want to bring about in the world? And that's a skill. So, when we talk about, again, pattern-breaking change, and we simplify it and take the layers back, something as complicated as the civil rights movement obviously was a series of actions. But I want to underline that even someone as amazing as Dr. King, as exceptional as he is, that visionary thinking is something that can be taught. And so what I'm invested in is how do we make the means for becoming visionary thinkers more broadly available? And so for me, the answer is make some art. It really is that simple. There's a number of parallels between how you make change and how you make art. The practice of being an art maker, the practice of being a change maker. So I'm going to offer 4. The first is to review. And by that I mean bringing fresh ideas, fresh eyes, fresh limbs, fresh ears, and open hearts to long-standing conventions. And whether those conventions are about the way that materials work together or they're about worldviews and the way our society works. It's about being able to move past that, to abandon assumptions, and to live in a space of potential, right? So reality is not a fixed constant. There's something else available. And so tied to that is a willingness to break the rules. If you can see beyond current conventions, if you can see beyond current assumptions, then you also have to be willing to go against the current, right? And again, I see this as a skill. And so part of that is also being willing to investigate and to probe and to push back and to question authority. And again, this is true whether you are standing before a canvas and trying to push past the rules of your particular genre. And this is true whether you are standing in front of a huge issue where you feel like there's a new policy that needs to happen. And so that takes courage, right? So particularly if you find yourself to be the lone voice, where you are regularly operating in a place of discomfort, to be a change maker, to be an artist, is to have a regular practice with negotiating fear and discomfort and vulnerability. To know what's at stake and still do it anyway. And again, that's a skill. And last but not least, the imagination. And I want to qualify that I'm talking about more than just daydreaming. I'm talking about more than just passively letting your mind wander, but really harnessing that capacity to dream and to focus it in on a targeted purpose and outcome, as well as to be able to envision the pathway to making that thing come true. And so, this brilliant quote from Einstein really underlines my point that, knowledge is about the known universe, and change makers and art makers push past the known universe. What they understand is that the imagination not only encircles the world that we live in, it expands it. And so again, for me, at the end of the day, even someone as powerful as Dr. King, as powerful as his innate talents were, there are things that can be cultivated, and I find that making art is a practice space for making change. So one of the things that I'm really invested in, as I said, is how do we make the means for becoming a visionary thinker more broadly available? And my answer is making art. And so then how do we make art more broadly available? So several years ago, I started an organization called the Laundromat Project. And as you would guess, we do art programs in laundromats. And so what that looks like is commissioning artists like Hector Kanenge to do really neighborhood-specific projects. So Hector, who lived in Inwood, noticed that there was an absence of ESL classrooms. And so even though he is an artist and there's a certain sense of what an artist can do, he brought his full talents to addressing that by converting a laundromat into an ESL classroom. Betty Yu, who already is a media rights activist and artist who fights often for labor rights, created a kind of interactive multimedia presentation around garment worker rights that she then showed to her community in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. And then Saran Song, who had a very strong yoga practice, and again, as an artist, brought that to her community by converting the laundromat into a yoga studio and then creating prayer flags to hang above the laundry machines. The other thing that we do is hire professional teaching artists to create curricula that allows the average person, someone who doesn't necessarily identify as a professional artist or as creatively gifted, to drop in while they're doing their laundry and take mini art classes that combine not just making an object, but actually looking at your neighborhood through fresh eyes. So I want to offer up a couple of images, including our tote bag workshop. And making a tote bag is a pretty simple act, but what the teaching artists do is offer this prompt: Hunts Point is, or Harlem is, or Bed-Stuy is. And again, it's a simple prompt, but it allows someone to fill in the blanks about how they understand their neighborhood. Here's a beautiful expression of how someone understands her neighborhood of Hunts Point, and that's great that she has that technical skill. But what's really powerful is when someone who's not quite 10 responds, "I need a big supermarket in my neighborhood." That's the kind of change I want to see in the world, where this little boy has already taken a look at his neighborhood, at his surroundings, can see what's missing, can understand that he deserves for that thing to be filled in, and that he's already practicing some of the skill sets to make that so. That he's naming it, that he's using that simple act of visioning and recording to deposit it into the universe, right? And so that's the kind of change that I'm invested in, where this becomes an everyday practice. I'm not really trying to make more professional artists. That's great if that's one of the outcomes. But what I want to make is art making a normalized skill set, something so normal that it is valued at the same level as math and reading, something that is obviously so powerful that it's the means of self-determination. What I know about art making is that it is an incredible tool for freedom and agency, and so it is that much more important in communities like Hunts Point and Harlem and Bed-Stuy and other communities that have historically been dispossessed of their imaginations. So if you can imagine a world where this is an everyday occurrence, where this is not extraordinary, it is absolutely normal to find opportunities to make art in your laundromat because it is a part of our everyday life. If you can imagine what's on the other side of that world, that's the world I want to live in. That's my vision. What's yours?